this video, I'm going to attempt to build one of the most compact gaming PCs you can put together right now that features a full-fat RTX 4090. I'll also be packing this system with loads of the latest hardware, a 13th gen Core i9, plenty of storage, to build the ultimate small-ish form factor gaming PC. Let's do this. The ASUS range of B650 motherboards truly has a design for everyone. Supporting AMD's latest and greatest Ryzen 7000 series processors, these boards come in a range of designs and form factors. With CPU and memory overclocking support on all boards, DDR5 memory support, and PCIe Gen 5 on selected designs, ASUS have got you covered. Learn about the full range of ASUS B650 motherboards down at the first links in the description below. This video down into three main sections. First, I'll be running you through all of the components in this build and why exactly I chose the individual bits that I did. Second, I'll be attempting to build this PC. I'm sure it won't be without drama, trial and tribulation. And third and finally, I'll be running you through the performance. Does this thing run like an oven? Is a question a few of you have probably got on your minds, so stay tuned for that and we'll be looking at frame rates in all the latest titles a bit later. Now let's kick things off as we always do with the processor and talk about all the parts around this first of all. This is the i9-13900K, and if I had to sum this processor up in 8 words, I would say it's the best gaming CPU you can buy right now. 1, 2, 3, 4 CPU you can buy right now. 8 words. It was 8 words. With super high clock speeds touching that 6 GHz mark on the boost and Intel's new performance and efficiency cores, it ticks all the boxes. I'll be installing it onto a mini ITX motherboard from ASUS ROG. This is their Z690i gaming Wi-Fi. You could also opt for one of their new Z790 boards, but I picked this one up because I already had it to hand. It's a bit cheaper, and of course with the BIOS update, nice and easy on the Z series lineup, we'll get out of the box support for 13th gen. Storage will be provided by this Seagate FireCuda 530. It's the best gaming SSD you can buy right now. Read and writes of 7 GB a second on both, and is available in 1, 2 or 4 TB capacities. Memory or RAM will be provided by the Thermaltake ToughRAM RGB D5. You can see it's a very nice looking memory kit, and with two 16 gig DIMMs, so 32 gigs of total memory, we should be pretty well covered. It looks very snazzy too, and fits in with the sort of accidental all Thermaltake theme of this gaming PC build. Graphics is a little bit obvious because it's probably, that was my phone. Very sorry, phone. Graphics will be provided by something which I'm hoping not to drop, the RTX 4090. While Nvidia have come under, well, some quite harsh criticism really for the 4080, which is sort of justified, the 4090, while expensive, has escaped the same treatment. It is a very, very pricey GPU, but it's currently the best gaming graphics card you can buy right now. The only bad news is that the Founders Edition card is basically the only GPU that will actually fit, in this case, from the 4090 lineup. I'm sure more compact ones will come in the future, but for now, this is your only option. As always, and shameless plug is coming here, you can read a full write-up of this build over on the website. So if you're on the bus or the train or an aeroplane with Wi-Fi, they exist now, you can actually read through rather than watching and disturbing everyone around you. Power will be provided by Thermaltake's ToughPower GF3 1350 watts. You can go lower, but I wanted to create something that was truly upgradable. So why not go for an 80+ gold certified power with just as much wattage as this one. Now the next component is probably where the biggest sacrifice comes in this build, to be honest with you, and that's the Thermaltake TH120 ARGB. Now there is nothing particularly wrong with this cooler, it just doesn't provide as much cooling capacity as you would perhaps like for a build like this one. But the problem is, with it being small, we are a bit limited on options. You could go for a twin tower air cooler, as that would potentially fit, but it then sort of takes over the aesthetic of the build, and that's not really what I want. The solution I'm going to go for instead is swapping out the included fan on this one for Thermaltake's upgraded SWAFANs, more on those later, and actually adding one on both sides. Then we've got a push-pull config to maximise the cooling. Now finally, the last component really of note, other than those fans, which I'll come back to later, is this, the Thermaltake Tower 100. Now, we've been including a few more Thermaltake products on the channel as of late. We used an open frame design from them. We've also used this case before in a dashing racing green, but I think this looks better in all black, to be honest honest with you. And of course, it's going to show off our GPU and all of our components from all sides. It's also pretty practically designed as well, with your power supply sitting at the bottom, your cooling at the top, allowing the pump to sit at the lowest point. Thermaltake have thought of a lot of things with this case. And for someone who wants to build a statement 4090 piece, this might just be a good case choice. With all the parts out of the way though, I think it's time I put this system together. Started off with the CPU, RAM, motherboard, and SSD. The processor is first, and that's going to install into this absolute chunk of a motherboard. Because of course it's so small in terms of its width and its height, they've actually created a design that's really deep in terms of all these extra heatsinks and stuff, which is very clever. So good work, ASUS. I like what you've done here. It also allows you to have more room to install like multiple SSDs by stacking them, which is very, very clever indeed. Processor just sits in there nice and easily. The memory is next, and I'm quite excited to try out this Thermaltake kit. Not actually used it before. Completely box fresh, which is always an exciting feeling. And even has this little blue plastic on for the metallic sections in the middle. Oh, I've dropped it. I've literally had it for 5 minutes and I've dropped it already. Has these metallic sections in the middle, which look awesome. Of course, DDR5 kit for this exclusively DDR5 motherboard. Remember guys, DDR4, DDR5, different sockets, so it's not going to fit in the wrong one. SSD is the last bit then of the motherboard, and the main distinction here to give you guys is that you want to pick up one without an included heatsink. That's because ASUS have very kindly included a massive tower of heatsinks for us, so there's no need to spend extra in buying one with a heatsink. In fact, for this build, it'll cause you more problems because the stacked approach means they'll probably be too thick to actually fit. Bit of a top tip for you there if you're building a small mini RTX system in particular. I've then ended up with something like this, which is what you call the completed motherboard assembly. But what I am going to do before moving on to the case is just unbox the brand new cooler, as it can often be easier to start the installation of this now while the motherboard is still out of the case. Taking a peek inside the box, and you'll find a couple of brackets and a rogue tube of thermal paste. We'll need that later. This one here is for AMD processors, so we're not going to need that in any capacity. And then these two here are your two Intel ones. They look very, very similar, but they're actually very marginally different. Your LGA 1700 bracket, which is labelled, is actually slightly wider. What I need to do is look at the back of the motherboard. You'll notice a couple of holes on each corner. That's actually for the backplate. So take off the 3M little sticky pads and then add the backplate into place. The 3M bit is just going to hold the backplate in so that it doesn't then go ahead and fall off. It's then a simple case of adding on these screws to the holes that now poke through the motherboard from the backplate. That's these ones on each corner, and I'll be using these to fasten the actual cooler head down later. That's all the prep though for the cooler, at least for now. Case time. So the Tower 100 is finally going to get its moments to shine. It's been about a year since I used the Racing Green edition that Thermaltake brought out, and to be honest with you, back then I was super impressed. So I'm kind of excited to give it another go, shall we say. And here it is. I actually forgot how small this thing was. I know that sounds a little bit of a weird statement to make. I am slightly worried about fitting the 4090 in, but I guess only time will tell. At the back of the case, we've got some thumb screws, which are not quite thumb tight. Gonna need a screwdriver to get these ones off. I can't fully remember how you actually take this thing apart, but my guess is that doing the screws at the back is probably not a bad place to start. So that's got a 120mm exhaust fan on. That's important to note for later. Otherwise, removing the back panel was essentially a useless endeavour. So let's take the top off instead. I think that's toolless. Yeah, that just hops out nice and easily. And then just these panels to take out now. How do they come out? The bottom? Does that come out? No additional progress has been made, so rather than reading the manual, I'm just going to go ahead and do what all good PC builders do and just keep unscrewing things until what I want to happen happens. Aha, we have a result. So the top frame is now off, and then, aha, these will just slide on out. Once all those panels are off, the motherboard can go in next of all, and this is going to sit here on this bottom panel. There's a bit of mesh ventilation behind, which is always nice to see. The motherboard should just slide into place over here like so. There's only 4 screws to put in, which makes things a lot easier. The next stage of my build master plan is installing the CPU cooler. By default, this is going to exhaust air. I'm going to change it to bring in air from the top of the case. I'll be using Thermaltake SWAFANs as they have better airflow, higher pressure, and you can swap the blades around so that the RGB is always facing the right way. Water block goes on first with the radiator on afterwards, and that is looking awesome. Question me. Ow! That really actually really hurt. Once that's done, I can move on to the bit of the build I've been most excited and, to be honest with you, quite nervous about, as you might be able to see from my recent unboxing a few moments ago of the 4090. Thankfully, I have recovered, which means I can now remove the PCI lanes. Now, I had a chat with a chap at Thermaltake here in the UK who was very helpful, and he told me that this would technically fit, despite the fact there's only 2 PCIe lane covers on the back of the case, and our GPU is 3 slots wide. There is a little notch in, though, to allow for the bottom slot to fit, so Thermaltake have obviously, genuinely, actually really thought about how they're going to do this. Just one of those quirks of using a massive GPU in not a massive case. So that's going to slide in, like so. It's very tight, and then that's going to sit on there. A bit of pressure. There we go. It's in. Oh my goodness me, this is outrageous. Obviously as well, one of the disadvantages here of the lack of an extra PCI slot, and I'll get a little shot to show you guys a bit more easily, is you can only screw in 2 screws, which obviously won't help as much with sort of rigidity and stopping it from wobbling. But because the case also is upright, we're not going to have GPU sag issues you would normally face. So that's always a good thing. To be fair, I was a bit skeptical, but that really is not going anywhere. And if I lift the case up, this is the ultimate test of whether it's, that's heavy, whether it's installed. Oh my goodness. Thermaltake, you've outdone yourself here. Look at that. Once the mesh and the glass is on, that's going to look sick. For now though, there is one more thing to do, as well as some more fans, and that's to install the power supply. I had a bit of a panic, but I'm pretty sure this supports full-size ATX power supplies, which saves us a bit of money and makes our 1350 watt unit work perfectly. It also has support for PCI Gen 5 power connectors, so I can run that alongside all the other cables, and I've also thrown in a couple of easy DIY fab cable extensions for good measure to aesthetically excel things. And I think that's been achieved. If one thing's for sure, this is gonna be a squeeze. So feed the cables through first. There we go. And then slide this into the back. Give it a push, and all that has to be done then is to screw it in. This little reusable bracket is really good because you can pop this out and just slide it in. It makes your life a lot easier in terms of prepping cables. And then screw number 4, lovely stuff. Motherboard power cable plugs up first, followed by the CPU power cable, and the GPU one is also then in, and I'm hoping if I add this little bracket onto the bottom, that should hide most of our cable management issues. As you'll be able to see though, there is a little bit of cable management to do before going ahead and turning this thing on. So I'll rejoin you in a moment once the whole thing is built up, all the panels are back on, and it's ready to go for some awesome performance figures. But first, how good does this thing look when it's all RGB to the max? There's only one way to find out. Taking a look at performance, and the first thing I want to do is touch on temperatures. This case obviously raises questions about how hot those components are going to run, and I'm pleased to report that while CPU temperatures were a little higher than some of our other builds, with 68 on average for the CPU and 72 maximum, they were by no means unsafe, or at a level which would prevent the CPU boosting. GPU temperatures were also very good, with a max of 57 degrees Celsius, with the mesh open design of the case on the left-hand side clearly paying dividends here. But how does this translate into performance? This 4090 i9 build should deliver the best of the best, and I'm glad to report that's basically what it did. Spider-Man Miles Morales at 4K high, DLSS quality, ray tracing enabled, everything you can imagine switched on, pulled in 115 frames per second on average. It was a similarly positive story in Warzone 2, 4K high, DLSS quality, 135 frames per second. Oh my goodness. This system stacks up well then in the latest titles, but does it carry on through into the other recently released COD game, Modern Warfare 2 Remastered? Once again, testing at 4K, high settings, DLSS enabled, and set to quality, the frame rate was impressive. 161 frames per second impressive. You'll also find 90 and 99 percentiles of 144 and 127 respectively, measured using both MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner and Nvidia FrameView. Fortnite was next up, 1080p competitive settings, and this build broke the the 300 frames per second mark, 303 FPS on average for the ultimate 1080p competitive gaming experience. Move through into Apex Legends at 4K high settings next up, and here a 195 FPS average was achieved. Not bad if you ask me. The gameplay was very smooth, and to nearly hit the 200 FPS cap was something I was very pleased to witness. This is a build then that's packed with performance, and you can learn more about all the parts, latest pricing and availability at the affiliate links in the description below. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.